Okay, I think we should start. So welcome to the Trino Contributor Call, 27th of March today. And we have a bunch of us here discussing things already. So we'll start the recording. And topics range from high-level stuff like a new book being available to deeply technical stuff that Roy and others wanted to chat about. So without further ado, let's roll, I guess. I guess the first urgent thing I wanted to mention is that we cut a 473 release and that had some breaking issues, so don't use it. 474 is out and has the fixes for it. So that's the first one. Any questions around that? Or remarks? Cool. The other thing is we are fast approaching Java 24 adoption, and with that came the removal of the Kudu and Phoenix connectors. They got removed in the 473 release, so yeah, we're in a good position there. A lot of the CVEs and the dupe dependency kind of problems from those two connectors are basically gone now. People can still use the old versions, and if either of these projects ever become compatible again, we would obviously consider adding stuff back in if someone steps up and does the work. But at this stage, those two are gone. That was also part of a work we are doing in terms of the packaging improvements of Trino. So in the last 2 or 3 releases, we introduced a core tarball, which has a lot less in it. And we also like basically only just the minimum required plugins in the few that we consider sort of like core, like the spooling protocol or some of the functions stuff. And we now have a tarball as well as a Docker image for that. And we have a packaging repository that shows how you can make your own tarball with configuration and your own Docker container. The Docker one is not yet finished, but I'm preparing a demo of it all, and I will show that in the Trino community broadcast that's coming up in, I don't know, 3 weeks or something like that. So that should be pretty exciting. And all that packaging is in preparation to avoid problems with too big binaries and being able to potentially add more connectors and not ship them as the default because they're like a very exotic use case or just a very small user base and stuff like that without overloading everyone. The last topic I have is Java 24. We in the latest release have Java 24 as a included runtime. So in the Docker container, the included runtime is Java 24, and we are a few releases away from, well, at least 1 or 2 releases away from making 24 a hard requirement. It's gonna happen soon. Don't know about an exact timeline. Mateusz, what's your feeling so far? I think so far everything has been working and looking good.
Yes, so I would like to get some feedback from like the community. So let's wait a release or 2 before we switch to language level.
Yeah.
At this stage, like we are not using any APIs that are specific to JDK 24, so we can always roll back to 23. I'm not expecting any issues, but like let's wait to get some confirmation.
Well, it's pretty cool. Considering how 24 was a pretty big change set and had a lot of changes required. It's pretty good that we got 2.
The biggest change was the removal of the security manager that affected different authentication like protocols like Kerberos. So that was the major issue.
Yeah, can you
We,
maybe
we
talk about what's happening there on the Kafka side? We had like I think you had to do an upgrade or something like that.
Yes, exactly. The Kafka client wasn't compatible with JDK 24. They fixed that in the Kafka 4.0 client, which also removed the Zookeeper Zookeeper mode, but we were using the Kraft mode anyway for a long time, so just the client was updated, nothing else.
And we pulled that in already, so we're good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, that's all the topics I had to discuss. So, anyone else? Roy suggested a couple of them already. Should we roll into those? Does anyone else want everything else? Maybe Roy, you go and talk about the history, query history thing you're working on.
Yeah, so I think few of you commented. I know Manfred, you for sure did, and Dane as well. We want to do this sort of change to the query UI and do that instead of like fetching the JSONs for the web UI from the coordinator memory, it's saved in some sort of global variable. We want to fetch it from another backend, so you could potentially save a larger set of queries, but not on the coordinator on the memory. So we have this sort of, after a lot of thoughts, this sort of big solution maybe, which I think also um, regards the gateway. So I'll just show. Can I show? I don't know.
Yeah, hang
Can I
on. Let
show?
me stop sharing, then you should be able to. There you go.
Oh, okay. Let's see. It can only let me. I don't know. Can you see the screen?
Not yet. There's a percent now at the bottom that. Oh, it's coming, I think.
Can you see the word page?
No,
The
yes, I see a diagram now.
Yeah. So what we suggest is a bit of a change to the gateway, but it also regards the coordinator as well. So that's why I'm talking about it here. So we have the coordinator, and it can use the event listener to send all finished queries to some sort of storage. It doesn't really matter which one, it's sort of abstract. And then, if it's possible, I haven't explored the option yet, take just the module of the UI and open it in the Trino Gateway. And then, as you guys know now, the Trino Gateway has this sort of history page. And then when you click the URL, it opens like the corresponding web page on the correct coordinator. So let's say I have two coordinators and queries running on both of them. So it will open each time a different one, depends on the query. And what we want to do is actually use the same code in the gateway, and one of two options will happen. If it's a running query, so it will display from the coordinator like what happens now essentially. But if it's a finished query, then it will go to the sort of storage, and the specific line in the code is this, but we'll have to sort of modify it, and then it will go to the storage and like use render the JSON from the storage, whatever you guys choose for yourselves, and show it in a web page that is essentially above the Trino Gateway server. That was our sort of thought. And if this makes sense, if there are any questions, that's what we want to try and do. Like reuse the Trino UI code, the web UI code, take it as a module and maybe plug it into the gateway. And
Are you
obviously,
proposing?
I'm talking about like maybe just the new UI, using the new web UI as well instead of changing the existing one.
Yeah.
But we need
Are
to
you?
develop maybe. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I'll hold it until you're done.
No, I'm done.
Okay, okay. Are you actually proposing any change to the coordinator? I just want to check since I think you said that at the beginning, but it sounds like it's just
No,
adding an
because
event listener.
I think if we just look at finished queries, which would be the easier maybe first
Yeah.
step, then it's just, I mean, the most difficult bit would be actually taking the module of the UI, the current Trino UI, plug it into the gateway server, and then just having maybe this sort of if
fatality rate of a normal car driver?
Manfred, we're getting some background noise from you.
So basically, this will be sort of an if else here. If the query is still running, then go to the normal coordinator UI, show that. Else go render the UI here and use the JSON, or maybe just use the existing endpoint which the coordinator has and fetch the JSON from there maybe. But I'm not about changing. So if the coordinator is standalone, then yeah, it will still have its own UI and that. I'm talking about utilizing the actual UI from the coordinator, plugging it into the gateway server, and having the gateway open up the UI in its own server for completed queries, which would be fetched from storage, or if any of you prefer, so you use the REST HTTP event listener, and then since this is an actual endpoint, then you can have whatever storage you want, but the bottom bit is up to whatever teams decide to do. I mean, either or, it doesn't matter.
How does the
Yeah.
how does the history UI know what all the queries are that are running?
What all the queries that are running?
So the Trino Gateway, I don't know, you could have 10 clusters. So it needs a way of knowing what all the queries are that are currently running on all the clusters.
But it knows that now as well, no?
It does?
No.
I don't know. I don't think so.
It keeps a track of what the gateway has seen, but it has its own concept of history with a limited window. It's not fetching that information real time from coordinators.
Yeah, so
Or it's not necessarily, you could have queries still running on the coordinators that are not tracked in the gateway anymore. But I think you don't necessarily, I think this is also proposing a way to, you can fetch the list of historical queries from that same storage, right?
Yeah.
And then to determine if it's still running or not. I guess that doesn't solve the problem of, Roy, I think you're also proposing a redirection while the query is running, right? And that's something,
I mean,
without that, you might lose the query for a while, right? Where you can it's there, you could view it on the live UI, but it might still be running and then disappear for a while and then reappear once it finishes. Just not ideal.
I mean, I haven't really gotten into the fine details between a running query, who will render that or not. I mean, the gateway can use, because what the Trino UI uses now is just its own route inside the coordinator. So it's just sort of injecting this into something else as long as the query is finished. I mean, from the gateway standpoint.
I think there's as you work on this, you'll a bunch of the design as you try and build one of these things is just kind of forced because of how things work. But I think there's one big thing to figure out up front, which is how you want to manage the queries that are still running. And there's off the top of my head, there's two pretty different approaches. So one is you just have the gateway go and background pull the coordinators to figure out the query IDs they have and their state. Not too difficult. Nice because it handles bunch of failure scenarios that are more difficult to deal with. But now you're polling, which is not always the best. The other approach is the coordinator sends two events for queries. One is query created, and the other one is query finished. Well, there might even be three. There might be a started. So depending on the complexity of the storage system, it could track which queries have been created, and then it could say, well, I saw this query was created. I know it's over here at this coordinator. And then you can pull the finished information out of it. tracking the creatives is nice because it allows you to understand a failure scenario, which is like you send a query and then a second later the coordinator crashes or goes away, and it's like, well, I'd really like to know what those last 10 queries were. So you might want to do that instead because it can give you this kind of gap information. Obviously, you can go further and do both if you wanted. So you have to think through that design around like what happens when what am I doing with the non-finished queries? The other thing is you're going to need a more robust API at the end. So another topic is you're going to need a robust API for fetching queries, because this thing basically has give me all the queries or give me one. And you're like, I'm going to store 30 days of queries. That might be like, well, in a high volume system, even in hours worth of queries could be like thousands and thousands. So you're going to want some sort of like very basic search and kind of paging.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is, are you thinking like storage wise to literally dump the JSON files?
For us, yes, just using S3 maybe. But that's up to anyone for like using like whatever event listener they want to use. So it can be extended. I know someone's working on doing like this abstract JDBC event listener, and we specifically use HTTP to Elastic, but like HTTP to a Logstash and then to an Elastic. But I mean, whatever anyone wants to do, and that's why like there's this sort of diagram as well, which like the easiest thing would be to have a REST server that implements, like you guys said, the sort of routes needed. And obviously I'll come with a more like detailed design, but just wanting to get feedback from you guys if the whole thing makes sense. We also have a Slack discussion, but it's not really active.
One of at Facebook, Ahmed built this thing where the coordinators would send the information to the event to a MySQL, and it would hold like, I don't know, a few days or days worth of queries or something. And then there was a background job that would write it into a table that Trino could query, and then like wipe it out of the MySQL because it would get too big. But that sort of design worked at Facebook scale. So
yeah, but also having like Trino just show the JSON is one thing. I want to utilize the whole like UI rendering, which can show me the live plan, because now when you look at the JSON, it's just like
so there's basically two kinds of screens that you're looking at. So one is this like summary list view that you can search. So it's like, I want to see, like, you're narrowing down the queries, you see a bunch of queries, and then you're like, okay, I'm interested in this one query. So once you go to the one query, like that, you can just pull a massive document out of like S3 and build whatever UI you want. It's the listing view and the searching that becomes complicated because you typically don't know the query ID, so you have to find it. But you don't need a lot of information to find a query, like the query type, the user, the date. I don't know, maybe a little bit of information. You might want the query text if you want to do full text search. Kind of depends. A lot of people don't remember what's in their query anyways. So if you just pull out like who ran it when and like maybe the tables they queried, like that's pretty good.
Yeah, one thing I want to just mention that you're gonna have to be aware of is the old UI, like the one that's like the current UI, is basically unmaintained and dead and terrible. And has like lots of old dependency in it. Mateo mostly and me have like tried to get it a bit more up to date, but it doesn't really have any like modern usage patterns and stuff for that. So there is the effort to have the preview UI built with newer components, and that's modern tooling. It uses Material UI, yeah, like, and then the Trino Gateway UI uses a similar but not identical stack. So you might have like, ideally we'll pull them together and use the same component libraries. I think one
Yeah,
uses
that's my thought as well. Like preparing this design for the next Trino UI, not for the current one.
yeah. So I would suggest to use like talk to Peter maybe as well, but who is the author of the preview UI. It might be worth standardizing on the components that are in that UI because they're a bit more modern in terms of look than the other ones. I forgot the name now. Sorry, that's in Trino Gateway. And we might end up porting the Trino Gateway UI over to that same framework as well to be on the same side. So whatever you build, you'll have to tackle with that whole complexity as well, right? Like if you end up building a component that you want to slot into the gateway UI and or the preview UI, you're gonna have to figure out a whole bunch of things. It's not gonna be easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add a plug. I would love to see this happen. We had an intern project a while back that was doing something kind of like this, where like we already had the storage aspects figured out, but we just used Trino to query it, and then as I think you were saying, like, you know, we get this big JSON blob, and it's like, you know, you need something to just like turn that into something that our users can view. You know, we know how to query it, but like being in the loop every time our users need to like go introspect a query that they ran more than 10 minutes ago is not ideal. But it was like a, you know, kind of separate standalone thing. Like if we could get that integrated into the gateway, that would be super slick. And I also like the direction of generally like, at least we want to move to a place where users don't touch coordinators at all. Like everything goes to the coordinator. So also kind of everything goes through the gateway. So getting, you know, the live UI either like displayed through the gateway via like a JSON call that loads the information, or, you know, I frame it and it routes the coordinator rendering it, whatever. Like I would love to kind of see that, getting all that UI centralized and standardized there.
I would definitely like to get to the point where, sorry, it's my son. I'd love to get to the point where when you're running a gateway, you just literally turn the UI off on the coordinators.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing there. They're just API only. Yeah.
Exactly. I think right now the coordinators, do they expose enough information in the API that you could actually do that today? I think they do server-side rendering for at least parts of the current UI, right?
Yeah.
So kind of depends on what you're trying to put in it. I'm not sure all the information's there. Like we would have to look at it, but I mean, doesn't matter. Just add more API.
Yeah.
Like we can add an API into the coordinator that's like only there for the gateway. Like it's like the UI has an API that's like for the UI only, and we added that because like the UI was changing so much in the days that like, you know, we would change something in the UI, change the API that we thought was just for the UI, and it would break a bunch of people like scraping and stuff like that. So we're like, fine, the UI will have its own private UI, and then it can change it anytime it wants. We could do the same thing for the gateway. We probably, I don't know exactly how the gateway versioning works, but we would probably version it for the gateway, and then it would be the gateway's API. Like if the gateway wanted to change it, fine. Like no one gets to complain. You know, it's only there for the gateway. Or we can add more standard APIs. Like the standard ones are just, they're annoying because like you can't change them. Yeah.
Yeah, the
People
preview
complain if
UI,
you change them.
the preview UI and our whatever we want to call it normal UI, they share what they are talking to. Like they are in the same module and they use the same, well, API internal thingy.
Yeah,
I'm
for
not
like
sure.
the detailed, I think for like when a query's still running, you would need to fetch the full data out of the coordinators. So we can just put that into the API, like as a thing for the gateway to use. And then it can just render any of the live charts. Once the query's finished, like, you know, a bunch of the UI doesn't make sense anymore. It's not live.
But I think regarding your point, we still need to keep in mind that people might only have to want standalone Trino cluster, and then we need to have the UI code there as well. And then we need to sort of think about how to like maintain the code cross.
I mean, I'd like to get to the point where we actually just use the gateway UI inside of the Trino, so we only have one thing to maintain, but that's further out. Like the gateway needs to be at the point where it's as good or better. But like, I mean, we can run the entire gateway inside of Trino today if we wanted. I mean, there's nothing magic about that in Java. So I think once we get to the point where we're like, this is better, then we talk about like, great, let's kill off the standalone UI.
Yeah, a related effort that's currently ongoing, which is like sort of like figuring out final details, is we're gonna have a SQL console as well. Like, and that has similar problems where you have an editor, you write your queries, you see the results, and that also is suitable to either be plugged onto the coordinator or in the gateway and then talk to whatever thingy in the backend, right? So we hope to get that soon as well. One thing I wanted to also question though is when does it make sense to explode some of those data loads into like a more relational sort of design so that querying does get easier? Like Eric, from your experience with people, like is it potentially useful to have like a combination of a model where some like I know IDs and like date ranges and like some things are available in a relational model and then the rest of the plan is a JSON blob in addition or something, so querying gets
That's
easier?
exactly what we do. That just depends on your event listener, right? The event listener gives you a Java object and you can do whatever you want with it. So how we do it is we pull out the stuff that we're most interested in as structured data, and then we stuff the entire thing as a JSON payload, just, you know, in case there's anything we need there for further introspection.
Yeah, I think like that, like ultimately I think that would make sense. Like if we build a UI on top of that and we want that to be performant and stuff, you don't want to have to deal with like constantly just parsing JSON and stuff. So if we need to figure out.
Well, I don't know. I mean, JSON is like the kind of format that everything internal uses for serialization. So if you want some consistency between the live UI and the storage, I actually think it can be nice to like for the searching and like loading the, you know, whatever the overview history page, you probably want structured fields, right? You don't want to load the whole JSON blob and then pull out just the ones you want. But for the actual rendering of like query specific info, I think you probably want just the original unmodified JSON to have the consistency.
Yeah, so it might be worth finding out the details on what we expose as like a sort of standard, what's in those fields. So
I've seen 3 or 4 of these be built. They're all basically like that. Like you pull out enough information so you can do the list rendering, you can do searching, and then you have like a full blob object for making the detailed page.
Yeah, so Roy, if you work on that, that might be worth thinking about, like, you know, filter use cases and stuff like that.
Yeah, I my experience is like it seems like a lot, but like I don't know, 95% of what you do is pretty obvious when you try and write it. You're like, oh, I guess I'll need this. So
yeah, so I think we'll try and do a more robust design and send it out to the core dev maybe channel and have people comment on that. I don't know if there's any standard to do it. I know from Airflow they do it in sort of a Confluence page, but I don't know, open to ideas. I don't know.
I think our standard is to open a roadmap or whatever, a GitHub issue, and then discuss more details there. I don't
Sure.
know. You
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
access to the wiki, right? So that doesn't work.
If stuff is longer, sometimes people use Google Docs. Doesn't really matter.
Sure.
Whatever works for you.
Eric, since it's kind of related, did you want to talk to that proposal that somebody from your team sent for the Trino Gateway as well quickly?
Yeah, sure. I think it's going to be the first of a few. But I think the one that we sent out recently was about adding more metrics to the gateway that are backend specific, and kind of like we have started moving towards we use the gateway as like a central place to do monitoring and kind of like aggregation of some stats across the backends. So I think the one that we put up recently was about at least tracking the
The health.
activation and health status of the backends. So we use that for alerting things like we have some automation as well as manual things that like deactivate or activate clusters, and like having the gateway emit that as a metric, we can do alerting on it and be like, hey, it's been inactive for 2 hours. Did somebody forget to activate it, or did some automation go wrong? Same thing for the health status. Like if the gateway determines that it's unhealthy, we need that as a metric so that our alerting systems can then go, process that. If I remember correctly, the gateway has like a module for doing some alerting, it itself firing some alerts. But at least for us, we have our whole alerting system built on top of metrics. So converting it to a metric, which then our standard alerting systems can use, is kind of a better approach for us. Plus you get to see the, trend historically, like, oh, it went inactive for 5 minutes and then came back, why did that happen? That kind of thing. So just putting some of that information where I feel like right now the gateway has this sort of like bespoke notification module thing that you can plug into, putting those as metrics. Like I'm assuming most of us have kind of standard metric tracking alerting systems, to kind of get that tied into more standard monitoring operational stuff.
Okay, because I think I misunderstood. I thought you wanted to have the tracking actually happening in the Trino Gateway database. You want to just have it emitted.
Yeah, I'll have to double check. I mean, today we track the current state in. Okay, I actually think there was two things that we mentioned in that. One was just somewhere you need a log of every time it was like activated and deactivated for sort of like auditing purposes, right?
Okay.
That's in addition to like emitting it as a metric that you can graph or whatever over time. For us, that auditing we just put into logs, and then we have our own log aggregation system that we can query. Putting it as like an auditable record in the gateway's database, I think would be fine. But then you get into some stuff about like how long do you retain it for, blah blah blah. That could be a useful thing to put on the gateway UI, right? I could see a lot of value in like being able to go to like, if you click on a backend on the gateway UI, it tells you like, here's all the stuff that happened, as opposed to me having to go to like some log store and write a log query or whatever. So I can definitely see the value there. So I would say we're not too opinionated about how that audit record is kept. Just that like we need some way to see all the changes that were made and like why, right? Like what actor activated or deactivated it? Was it automated? Was it manual? That has helped us detect some bad automation in the past where it got deactivated and we were like, that shouldn't have happened. And then we see, oh, it was this script. Oh, well, then we can go look at the logs of that thing to figure out what happened there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's what I misunderstood. I thought we're talking just about the gateway UI, not the emitting of the metric. So it's good to know that it's both. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll double check. Like I said, we're like planning on submitting a few things related to monitoring. So the specific one we submitted, maybe it was more focused than what I just described. But that's kind of the vision of what we want.
Yeah, no, but like it definitely sounds good.
I'd interject as well. We'd love to add another metric to the Trino Trino cluster just to a health metric. I don't think there is one now. Now it's just like to sort of an HTTP endpoint, and we'd love to have just another metric added there.
What kind of metric?
Just like a health metric, so we can have because our Grafana doesn't like pop or like events based on HTTP. It can only do
Like
based on
like a 1 or a 0 or something like that.
maybe, yeah, something like that.
Okay,
We'd
Alright.
work with something.
Sure.
You can just add it.
Like sort of like a liveness or readiness probe sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Maris. Okay, cool. I think that rounds out that topic of event listener storage, query history, UIs, blah blah blah. What's next?
I can talk about an Airflow issue if anyone's interested, which we're trying to get solved, and we have a PR that's just waiting to get merged. It might be a bit too specific. I sent it in the chat as well.
Is it a Trino? Yeah, like
It's a
issue?
Trino related issue. So Airflow has operators, and once there was a Trino operator, and now there's a specific, like, sorry, not specific. There was a specific Trino one. They killed it off to have this generic SQL execute query operator, and now there's like Trino specific problems within that generic operator. I can share the screen as well. So basically, if people who do know Airflow, so they'll know what I'm talking about. But there's a problem with XCOM. If we want to cancel XCOM, then Airflow thinks its query will be ran, but because of the Trino client protocol, then Trino actually kills the query. I think it's user cancelled error. Yeah, it says it there. And then if I want to have this sort of Airflow doing Trino queries, like scheduling it, then actually no query runs, but Airflow does think Trino is running the queries. We have a PR. We're just waiting for someone to review and allow it. Like we've got the solution. So if anyone has any connections, we'd love help with that because we don't have any, because we're getting static from the Airflow guys.
And you're suggesting here not making a change to the SQL operator, but actually creating a dedicated Trino one, right?
We suggested that originally, and then we have the actual change. So I can send the PR as well if anyone wants to look at that.
Yeah, give me the.
We wanted to have. I sent it in the chat. At the beginning, we wanted to do that, but now we just added a change. There's a whole discussion. I can share that screen as well if anyone wants to see. If I'll find it. Yeah, this one. So shout out to Eden as well for doing all the work. I'm just presenting it. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't have any connections to Airflow team, but
yeah, I think Eric said that he might have some sort of.
Yeah, I will check with our Airflow team to see if they have connections. We don't use the SQL operator. We have like a custom one. So, you know, we don't work with this, but I can see if anybody, you know, knows somebody who might be able to help out.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a custom one that just does this, just wraps it, inherits, and does it. But ideally, we'd want to be as close to the open source as possible. Like we do with Trino as well. Like everything we find, we contribute back.
that's cool. All right.
That's everything for today.
Cool. All right. Who's next? We have another 20-ish minutes left. Marius, something came up in the maintainer call earlier. Can you maybe clarify with the recent PR that removed the support for the Thrift protocol thingy for the Unity catalog? Does that mean we essentially removed support for Unity catalog altogether currently?
No. Yes. From the Trino open source, yes. Yes.
Because that protocol was completely deprecated, right?
Yeah, we were chatting with Databricks, and they told us that they have less than 10 clients. Starburst being one of them that was using for CI purposes the Thrift integration over HTTP. So they replaced it in favor of REST API, and that's why I wanted to remove the test code actually, and postpone the removal of the production code. But Yuya, one of the maintainers, was more vocal about removing everything. So that's the reasoning, the story around it.
Okay, well, I'll just have to go ahead and basically remove the Databricks Unity mention on the Trino website then, because we don't support it then currently, right?
Well, we support connecting with Databricks, not with Databricks Unity.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like there's a separate entity.
Yeah.
For Unity. Okay.
Since I see our very good friends from AWS here, from Athena, how likely would it be that you find some time to devote to bits and pieces around the partition projection functionality? Not expecting that, not any commitment, but just asking.
I think that was for you, James.
Yep.
Or for Shainer, 08, the guy in the Ferrari. I see that you switched the office, James.
Yep. We're RTO 5 days.
Welcome back to the office.
Thanks. I haven't seen the ticket yet. I'll have to go through it. I mean, it depends on what the ask is. Nobody has actively worked on partition projection in a long time. I think it's sort of been considered a done feature. So like for feature requests like this, it would depend. If it's straightforward enough, we might be able to find time. But obviously, I can't speak for, I don't have any engineers at my disposal that I like have any access to directly. So
yeah. Okay.
That issue looks pretty old though, like what you
listed. Yeah, it came recently. Nothing that relevant. So I think it's more bits and pieces around this functionality that's specific more to Athena. Okay.
Cool. Anybody else have any other topics they want to talk about?
I have one that may be of interest to some of the people that are interested in Iceberg. We are looking into introducing a syntax for doing zero copy clones, Iceberg branching. If anyone is willing to collaborate on that, we are working now on the syntax for exposing it. The execution part is relatively straightforward, but we may be changing the syntax pretty much with regards, not the SQL syntax. We will introduce specific syntax for working with branches. If anyone is willing to collaborate, please reach out, and we can involve you in the process. Iceberg branching. Yeah.
Cool.
Is there a Slack channel where that's being discussed?
No, currently we are internally we have put together a document and we are trying to discuss it with Martin Traverso. But that's actually a good point. This is going to be open source, so I'm going to ask you, to bring the document to the open source. It definitely will help. Thank you very much for the
Yeah,
suggestion.
I would definitely post it in like Core Dev and mention in Iceberg. I assume the syntax is going to be generic for anything that supports the concept of branching, so it's not necessarily a pure Iceberg topic.
Yeah, we went ahead and I asked on one of the I think on ChatGPT, and I was asking which data sources deal with branches and how, and we received some very exotic names to look into. So we have went through multiple data source providers to see how they expose the syntax around it. So I will follow up with Yuya, and we will very likely bring this to the discussion is definitely can be done in public. Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Cool.
And another question from my side in the group, also around Iceberg. Does anyone have any sentiment about geospatial support in Iceberg? I've seen that the Iceberg community is investing efforts in adding support for geospatial. So I'm wondering if anyone is opinionated in this regard.
I know we have teams that might be interested, might not, but I think there is interest somewhere. I can check if you want.
Sure. It's not something that I'm acquainted with, so I'm asking around to see.
I'm reviewing the ESRI connector from the Amazon folks, which is a geospatial file format. It's pretty straightforward stuff. Yeah. So it is I'm not exactly sure what the Iceberg guys are doing, but if it ends up looking at all like the Hive binary encoding, like it'll probably just work. But we'll have to see what they come up with.
Well, ESRI is like the super heavyweight in that geospatial community, so their standard will be widely used and adopted. And I'm pretty sure it's also supported by PostGIS and like the whole like that. Eric, you jumped in. Did you jump in for something specific as well, or you just wanted to hang out with us? It's always good to have you. Monica? Mateusz? Anything else? Anyone? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I will have to find another date for the April time. I'm not sure yet what the current date is. It's 20th something. I'll have some travel also coming up, so I'm not sure what I can make work, but it'll be a similar time frame again. And as usual, see you on Core Dev and in the pull requests and reviews and everywhere else.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.